Have you ever felt that certain moments in your life were somehow predestined, as if invisible hands were guiding you toward a specific encounter or revelation? That strange feeling that what appears to be random chance might actually be part of a greater design. Now, I want you to consider something profound. The encounter between you and these words right now is not an accident. It's not mere chance or blind destiny that brought you here. There's something deeper at work. Has this ever happened to you? You find yourself drawn to a message, a book, or a video without fully understanding why, only to discover it contains exactly what your soul needed at that precise moment. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. This is what the ancients understood about divine timing. You see, there are two kinds of time operating in our lives. The first is what the Greeks called chronos. That's the linear, predictable, measured time we're all familiar with. The clock on the wall, the calendar on your phone. But there's another dimension of time they called kairos, the perfect appointed moment when eternity touches the shore of your life and transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might completely reshape how you view the seemingly random events of your life. Those unexpected meetings, those surprising opportunities, those doors that closed only to reveal better ones. All of these may be part of an invisible architecture designed specifically for your journey. Think about it. How many times have you read something, heard something, or met someone precisely when you needed that wisdom the most? These aren't coincidences. They're kairos moments, divine appointments where the veil between the seen and unseen becomes thin, allowing wisdom to flow directly into your consciousness. The truth is that when a reader and a message meet in kairos time, something remarkable happens. The words become seeds and consciousness becomes fertile soil. If you were to close your eyes right now and take a deep breath, you might recognize that the same energy orchestrating your heartbeat has brought you to this moment. What if the timing of this video appearing in your feed wasn't random at all? What if your decision to click on it wasn't merely curiosity, but a response to a higher calling? The synchronicities we dismiss as coincidence might actually be breadcrumbs leading us toward our highest purpose and greatest fulfillment. In the coming minutes, we'll explore how to recognize these divine encounters in your daily life, how to discern between ordinary time and those extraordinary moments of intersection with the eternal. You'll begin to see patterns where before you only saw chaos. If these divine principles are speaking to your spirit, make sure you subscribe to join our community of spiritual seekers. Each video is designed to illuminate another aspect of your journey toward purpose and transformation. You begin to see the hidden architecture behind what we've been taught to call coincidence. These predestined encounters are far more significant than we realize. They're actually sacred portals where your soul remembers fragments of its ultimate purpose. Think about those pivotal moments in your journey when a single conversation or even a random book falling from a shelf completely redirected your path. These aren't minor detours. They're cosmic intersections designed to realign you with your deeper destiny. The most profound revelations often come wrapped in the most ordinary packages. A chance meeting with a stranger who says exactly what you needed to hear. An unexpected delay that saves you from an accident. A seemingly random recommendation that leads to a life-changing insight. These moments of divine synchronicity can alter your life trajectory more profoundly than years of deliberate effort. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring the hidden truth about divine activity in our daily lives. So much of this sacred work happens behind the veil, in the shadows of our awareness. While we're busy making plans, calculating probabilities, and seeking visible signs, an invisible hand is orchestrating events with perfect precision. The intricate tapestry of your life is being woven thread by thread in ways your conscious mind cannot fully comprehend. Consider the unexpected turns in your own story. The job you didn't get that led to a better opportunity. The relationship that ended to make space for authentic love. The financial setback that taught you what truly matters. At the time, these may have felt like failures or disappointments, but looking back, can you see how they were actually perfect recalibrations? This is the mindset shift that transforms victims into visionaries. The most significant decisions in your life often didn't feel like decisions at all. They felt like being drawn towards something irresistible, being moved by an unseen current towards shores you didn't even know existed. This is because divine guidance rarely announces itself with trumpets and flashing lights. Instead, it whispers through intuition, nudges through coincidences, and reveals itself through patterns that only make sense in retrospect. Behind every crisis is a classroom. Behind every delay is divine timing. Behind every loss is the liberation of something greater trying to enter your life. The revelation comes when you understand that what appears as chaos on the surface is actually a carefully orchestrated journey of transformation. The universe isn't working against you, it's working at levels beyond your current perception. Think of it like an invisible architect who sees the complete blueprint while you only see the current construction zone. Where you see demolition, the architect sees necessary preparation for a stronger foundation. Where you experience darkness, the designer knows it's the tunnel leading to brilliant light. Every unexpected turn, every puzzling event, every seemingly random encounter has been carefully positioned by loving hands, working where your eyes cannot see. This understanding doesn't just change how you view your past, it revolutionizes how you experience your present and approach your future. When you recognize that divine activity is constantly operating behind the scenes of your life, you develop a profound sense of trust. You stop fighting against the current and learn to flow with it, recognizing that even the obstacles are guiding you toward your highest good and greatest impact. Think about the most challenging chapter in your personal story, that period that made no sense, that seemed like pure chaos or abandonment. Now look at where it led you, what it taught you, how it shaped your character and clarified your purpose. The darkest tunnels often lead to the most breathtaking views. If you're resonating with these ideas, write in the comments, "I see the blueprint now." I'm curious to know about those moments in your life where you've glimpsed the divine architecture behind what seemed like random events. Now, let's explore how to distinguish between the voice of divine guidance and the noise of our own fears. One of the greatest ironies in our spiritual journey is how desperately we search for signs and guidance while completely missing the illumination already bathing our path. It's like someone standing in brilliant moonlight, frantically waving a tiny flashlight, wondering why they can't find their way. We pray for direction, we beg for clarity, we look for cosmic billboards pointing the way, all while the answers we seek have already been generously provided. This mindset revelation transforms everything when you truly grasp it. Think about how many times you've asked for a sign, a confirmation, a coincidence that would validate your next step. Meanwhile, the moon of divine wisdom has been steadily illuminating your entire landscape, casting gentle light on every step before you. The guidance isn't hidden. Our awareness is simply focused in the wrong direction. We often approach the spiritual journey as if it were a treasure hunt with cryptic clues, when in reality, it's more like coming home to wisdom that has been patiently waiting for our recognition. The answers we seek aren't concealed in complexity, but revealed in simplicity. The voice of truth doesn't need to shout because its clarity cuts through all the noise. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring how to distinguish between authentic divine guidance and the counterfeit voice of anxiety. This discernment is perhaps the most critical skill in navigating your soul's journey. The difference is striking once you learn to recognize it. The voice of divine wisdom speaks once with perfect clarity, while anxiety screams 1,000 times and says nothing of value. Have you noticed this pattern in your own inner landscape? Anxiety circles endlessly, repeating the same fears in slightly different packaging, creating a hurricane of what-ifs and worst-case scenarios. It exhausts you with its persistence. While offering no resolution, divine guidance, by contrast, arrives with a quiet certainty that settles your entire being. It doesn't need to justify itself or convince you through repetition. This distinction becomes your internal compass, a revelation that saves you from countless detours. When you receive authentic guidance, it comes with a signature of peace, even if the direction itself challenges you. The message may stretch you beyond your comfort zone, but it doesn't torment you with indecision. Anxiety, on the other hand, always leaves you more fragmented than before, more confused, more depleted. Behind the scenes of your thought processes, these two forces are constantly at work. One seeks to connect you with your highest path. The other aims to keep you trapped in familiar limitations. One speaks the language of expansion. The other communicates through contraction. Learning to distinguish between them transforms not just your spiritual practice, but your entire decision-making framework. This is why contemplative practices like meditation and mindful awareness are so powerful. They create the inner stillness necessary to hear the subtler voice of truth beneath the clamor of anxiety. They train you to recognize the qualitative difference between thoughts that emerge from wisdom and those generated by fear. This discernment isn't just spiritual theory, it's practical wisdom for navigating every crossroads in your journey. Think about the most significant decisions in your life, the ones that led to genuine growth and authentic happiness. Did they come from a place of anxious deliberation or from a moment of quiet clarity? Did they arrive after exhausting mental gymnastics, or did they emerge from a space of inner knowing? Most people discover that their best decisions came when they finally stopped overthinking and allowed that single clear voice to guide them. Subscribe now to continue this sacred exploration together. Our channel offers insights and revelations that will help you recognize divine guidance in every area of your life. The transformation happens when you stop asking for more signs and start trusting the illumination already present. It's about cultivating the awareness to recognize that what you've been seeking has been seeking you all along. The revolution in consciousness isn't about finding new information. It's about seeing with new eyes what has always been right in front of you. If you've experienced that moment of perfect clarity, breaking through the static of anxiety, type "Clarity speaks once" in the comments. I'm curious how many of you have noticed this profound difference between wisdom's whisper and fear's endless chatter. Let's explore now how this understanding becomes the foundation for creating breakthroughs, even when everything seems to be falling apart around you. When we face life's greatest challenges, what truly separates those who break through from those who break down? It's the understanding that faith isn't just a comforting thought, it's a spiritual antibiotic working against the infection of failure. This perspective shifts everything about how we approach our difficulties and setbacks. Most people abandon their healing process the moment they feel slightly better, but that's precisely when the real transformation is just beginning. Think of it this way. When a doctor prescribes antibiotics, they always emphasize completing the full course of treatment, even after symptoms disappear. Why? because the infection can resurge, often stronger and more resistant if you stop too soon. Faith works with the same precision. The consistent application of belief, especially when external evidence hasn't yet manifested, is what allows the complete healing and transformation to take hold in your life. This isn't wishful thinking, it's spiritual science at work. The breakthrough comes when you maintain your conviction even after the initial. Inspiration fades when you hold the vision through both sunshine and storms. This steadfastness creates a bridge between the invisible realm of potential and the visible world of manifestation. Most people abort their miracles halfway through the gestation period simply because they don't understand this principle of spiritual perseverance. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring the fascinating frontier where spirituality meets neuroscience. What modern researchers are discovering about the brain confirms what mystics have taught for centuries. Your declarations literally rewire your neural circuitry. This emerging field of neurotheology reveals how affirmative statements physically reconfigure the pathways in your brain, creating new connections that support your transformation. When you make a positive declaration with intention and emotion, you're not just speaking words into the air. You're actually sculpting your brain's architecture, carving new neural highways that make certain thoughts, feelings, and perceptions more accessible. This is why affirmations aren't just psychological tricks. They're physiological tools that prepare your entire being for revelation and change. The revelation here is profound. Your brain doesn't distinguish between what you vividly imagine and what you physically experience. This means that declaring, "I am worthy," "I am capable," or "I am divinely guided" with conviction creates the same neural firing patterns as actually experiencing these states. You're essentially rehearsing a new reality until your nervous system accepts it as normal. Behind the scenes of this process is a remarkable symphony of neurochemical changes. Consistent affirmative practice actually increases the density of positive neural networks while allowing limiting belief pathways to weaken through disuse. It's like redirecting a river's flow. At first, it requires conscious effort to carve a new channel. But once established, the water naturally flows in the new direction. This understanding revolutionizes our approach to personal transformation. It's not enough to casually think positive thoughts or half-heartedly mumble affirmations. The power comes when you declare truth with the full force of your being, when you speak with authority to your own consciousness. This is the secret wisdom behind ancient practices of declaration and decree. They weren't just ritualistic formulas, but precise tools for rewiring spiritual circuitry. The impact of this practice compounds over time. Each declaration strengthens those neural pathways, making them more dominant in your thought patterns. What once required conscious effort eventually becomes your default perception. The journey from struggle to strength, from limitation to liberation, happens one declaration at a time, gradually then suddenly, like water slowly eroding stone until the breakthrough finally occurs. Consider how you speak to yourself throughout the day. Are your internal declarations reinforcing limitation or possibility? Are your words carving pathways of fear or channels of faith? The most profound mindset shift happens when you recognize that your declarations aren't descriptions of what is. They're invitations to what could be. They're not reactions to your current reality, but creative forces shaping your future experience. If you've been practicing faith like an antibiotic and using declarations to rewire your neural pathways, type "rewiring my reality" in the comments. I'm curious how many of you have experienced that moment when a consistent declaration finally breaks through into tangible reality. Let's explore now the threshold that separates those who merely hear spiritual truth from those who are truly ready to receive life-changing revelation. There exists a profound threshold in the spiritual journey that separates casual seekers from genuine receivers of wisdom. This threshold isn't intellectual, it's experiential. Have you noticed how some people can hear the exact same spiritual truth as you, yet it seems to pass through them without taking root, while for you it resonates at the core of your being? This isn't coincidence or superior understanding, it's about readiness. The hidden truth is that deep spiritual revelations aren't meant for everyone at the same time. These mysteries reveal themselves only to those who have developed a particular kind of soul thirst, a divine discontentment with surface-level existence. It's when you've reached that place of genuine weariness with old patterns, old beliefs, and old identities that the deeper wisdom becomes accessible to you. Think about watershed moments in your own journey. Those revelations that fundamentally changed your perspective didn't arrive when you were comfortable and satisfied with your understanding. They came when you were in that sacred space of questioning, when you were honest enough to admit that your current framework wasn't sufficient anymore. This spiritual hunger creates a magnetic force that draws the exact teaching you need at precisely the right moment. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring what happens when you finally cross that threshold. You find yourself in what mystics throughout the ages have called the narrow passage, a transitional space where transformation is both inevitable and uncomfortable. This corridor exists between who you've been and who you're becoming, between the identity that's dissolving and the one that's still taking form. This narrow passage is why so many people retreat from genuine spiritual growth. The uncertainty of this transition feels threatening to the ego, which craves the safety of familiar shores even when those shores no longer nourish you. The breakthrough comes when you recognize that this corridor of uncertainty isn't a punishment, it's a birth canal. What feels like death to the old self is actually the necessary passage to new life. The journey through this corridor requires tremendous courage. There's a moment where you can no longer return to who you were, yet you haven't fully emerged as who you're becoming. This liminal space, this threshold between worlds, is where the most profound alchemy of the soul takes place. In indigenous traditions, this stage was often symbolized by the vision quest or the dark night. In modern psychology, we might call it the integration phase of transformation. What makes this passage so challenging is the lack of reference points. Your old identity markers no longer fit, but your new sense of self hasn't yet solidified. Old relationships may feel increasingly distant. Former interests may lose their appeal. Even your emotional responses to situations may shift dramatically. This disorientation isn't a sign that something's wrong. It's evidence that everything is working exactly as it should. The revelation that transforms your journey is recognizing that this narrow corridor isn't just something to endure, it's sacred ground. It's in this very space where nothing feels certain that your greatest potential awakens. The caterpillar doesn't transform into a butterfly by simply wishing for wings. It must enter the chrysalis, that dark, confined space where it completely dissolves before reassembling into something entirely new. Your own chrysalis moments, those periods of confusion, questioning, and discomfort, are actually the most accelerated growth phases of your life. The narrow passage isn't a detour from your path, it is the path. Every spiritual pioneer throughout history has walked this corridor. Every breakthrough, innovation, and paradigm shift emerged from someone willing to stand in this uncomfortable threshold between the known and the unknown. What appears as breakdown is often breakthrough in disguise. What feels like losing your way is actually finding a truer path. The narrow passage strips away everything that isn't authentically you, leaving only your essential nature, your divine blueprint that was there all along, waiting to be revealed beneath the layers of conditioning and compromise. If you recognize yourself in this transition space right now, navigating the narrow corridor between old and new, type "crossing the threshold" in the comments. I'd love to know how many of you are currently experiencing this sacred discomfort that precedes emergence. Let's explore what happens when what feels like personal collapse is actually divine architecture working to position you for something greater. What if the very moments you've labeled as collapse in your life are actually the most precisely designed aspects of your journey? This perspective revolutionizes how we interpret our most painful chapters. When relationships end, careers falter, or plans crumble, we naturally interpret these events through the lens of tragedy or failure. But there's a profound revelation waiting when you shift your perspective. What you're experiencing isn't random destruction, but divine architecture at work. Think about how an architect approaches renovation. Before building something stronger and more expansive, they must first remove what can no longer support the new vision. The demolition phase isn't punishment, it's preparation. The dust and debris aren't evidence of abandonment, but of active engagement. This same principle operates in your spiritual journey, though it's much harder to recognize when you're standing in the middle of the rubble. The breakthrough comes when you understand that collapse isn't the end of your story. It's the necessary reconfiguration of elements that creates space for your expanded destiny. Every relationship that dissolved, every door that closed, every identity that no longer fits. These aren't failures, but strategic repositionings, orchestrated by a wisdom that sees beyond your current horizon. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring the psychology of this transformative corridor. When you find yourself in this narrow passage, you experience a unique form of disorientation. Your old identity is suffocating, struggling for the familiar air of certainty, while your new self hasn't yet taken recognizable form. There are no windows to orient yourself, no familiar doors to exit through, only the echo of your steps in the darkness of uncertainty. This corridor feels claustrophobic precisely because it's meant to be transitional, not residential. You weren't designed to live here forever. You're meant to move through it. Yet paradoxically, it's in this very space of maximum constriction that divine creativity works most powerfully. Just as a seed must break open in the darkness of soil before it can reach toward light, your own expansion requires this stage of compression and discomfort. What makes this corridor particularly challenging is the absence of reference points. In normal transitions, we can look backward or forward for orientation. But in profound transformation, the past no longer applies, and the future hasn't yet revealed itself. This state triggers our deepest survival fears because humans are meaning-making creatures. We need context to feel safe. When all context dissolves, the primal brain interprets this as threat rather than emergence. The journey through this passage requires a mindset revolution. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" the more powerful question becomes, "What is this preparing me for?" Instead of seeing yourself as a victim of collapse, you recognize yourself as the subject of a master renovation project. The very elements of your life that seem most chaotic are often the ones being most carefully arranged. Consider the most significant breakthroughs in your life thus far. Didn't they emerge from periods of greatest uncertainty? Didn't your most authentic qualities reveal themselves precisely when familiar structures fell away? This pattern isn't coincidental, it's architectural. The narrow corridor strips away everything that isn't essentially you, creating the conditions for your truest self to emerge. Behind the scenes of your apparent collapse, an intelligence is working that sees the complete blueprint, while you can only perceive the current demolition. The architect doesn't destroy the house out of punishment or neglect, but out of vision for what that space could become. Similarly, divine architecture doesn't dismantle aspects of your life out of cruelty, but out of commitment to your expanded capacity. Remember this: The collapse is never the conclusion. It's the necessary preparation for construction. The corridor is never the destination. It's the passage to expansion. What feels like breakdown is actually breakthrough in disguise. What appears as demolition is actually the foundation of a more authentic expression of who you were always meant to be. If you've experienced a collapse that eventually revealed itself as divine architecture in your life, share your revelation by typing divine demolition in the comments. Let's explore how God's apparent silences can actually be the most active moments in your transformation. One of the most transformative mindset shifts on your spiritual journey is understanding the profound difference between divine demolition and punishment. Our religious and cultural conditioning often leads us to interpret life's difficulties as some form of cosmic penalty, as if God were an angry parent wielding discipline for our mistakes or shortcomings. But this framework fundamentally misunderstands the divine methodology at work in our lives. When structures crumble around you, when relationships dissolve, when careers transform, these aren't punishments designed to cause suffering. They're strategic demolitions orchestrated by perfect wisdom. Think about it this way. Imagine a master architect who sees that a wooden house cannot withstand the approaching storm. This architect doesn't tear down the structure out of caprice or cruelty, but out of foresight and compassion. The demolition isn't the end. It's the necessary preparation for building something more resilient. This revelation changes everything about how you interpret your challenges. What if every apparent destruction in your life is actually protection in disguise? What if what feels like punishment is actually preparation? The breakthrough comes when you recognize that God isn't destroying what you built to teach you a lesson, but to position you for a level of blessing your current structure simply cannot contain. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring one of the most mysterious aspects of divine guidance, the phenomenon of silent walls falling. Have you noticed how human transitions typically involve noise, drama, and clear demarcations? When people end relationships, change careers, or close chapters, there's usually conflict, discussion, emotional processing. Doors slam with sound and fury, but divine transitions often happen with an entirely different signature. Walls fall silently. You simply find yourself on the other side of a situation without being able to pinpoint exactly when or how the shift occurred. One day you realize you no longer crave the addiction that once controlled you, or you notice that the relationship that caused such anguish no longer triggers emotional turmoil, or the career path you obsessed over has quietly lost its appeal without any dramatic epiphany. This silent relocation isn't coincidence or mere psychological evolution, it's providential repositioning. It's the evidence of hands working behind the scenes of your consciousness, gently shifting your perception, your desires, and your attachments without the trauma of forced extraction. These silent transitions are often the most profound, precisely because they bypass the ego's resistance and operate at the level of identity transformation. The wisdom tradition teaches that the loudest transitions are often the most superficial, while the deepest changes happen in silence, like the seasons changing or a flower blooming. No fanfare, just faithful unfolding according to divine timing. This understanding brings tremendous peace when you're navigating life's uncertainties. You don't need to orchestrate dramatic exits or force revelations. Your willingness to be guided is enough. The walls that need to fall will fall in their perfect timing. Behind the scenes of your consciousness, this silent work continues regardless of whether you recognize it. Think about how many attachments you've outgrown without deliberate effort. How many fears have dissolved without direct confrontation? How many shifts in perspective have occurred without you engineering them? These are the fingerprints of divine methodology, the gentle but persistent rearrangement of your internal furniture to create space for expansion. The journey from resistance to surrender happens when you recognize the signature of this silent work. Instead of fighting against every closed door, questioning every ended relationship, or mourning every dissolved plan, you begin to trust the intelligence that's repositioning you. You develop what spiritual pioneers have called divine indifference, not a lack of care, but a profound trust that what leaves your life through silent walls falling is making room for what truly belongs in your next chapter. This trust doesn't eliminate grief or confusion, but it transforms how you move through these emotions. Rather than being trapped in "why me" thinking, you begin asking, "Where is this leading me?" Instead of seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances, you recognize yourself as the subject of a divine repositioning that's moving you, sometimes imperceptibly, toward greater alignment. If you've experienced these silent walls falling in your life, those gentle transitions where you found yourself unexpectedly on the other side of a situation, share your experience by typing "silent transition" in the comments. Let's explore how liberation often disguises itself as loss when we're in the midst of divine redirection. One of the most painful aspects of personal transformation is the feeling of loss that accompanies periods of major change. The relationship ends, the career shifts, the community dissolves, the identity crumbles. We naturally interpret these experiences through the lens of deprivation. Something valuable has been taken from us, leaving a void where fulfillment once lived. But what if we've fundamentally misunderstood what's happening? What if what feels like devastating loss is actually profound liberation in disguise? This perspective shift revolutionizes how we navigate life's most challenging transitions. The breakthrough comes when you recognize that the pain of collapse often stems not from the change itself, but from confusing loss with liberation. What you believed was indispensable to your happiness, security, or identity was actually only necessary up to a certain point in your journey. It served its purpose in a particular season, but continuation would mean limitation. Think about how many things you once considered absolutely essential to your happiness that you've outgrown. Relationships that once defined you, beliefs that once anchored you, accomplishments that once validated you. In retrospect, you can see how these elements were perfect for who you were then, but insufficient for who you were becoming. What felt like devastating loss in the moment was actually the necessary liberation that allowed your next level of growth. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring the wisdom behind these divine redirections. Just as a master architect understands structural integrity, divine wisdom sees when your current life configuration simply cannot support your soul's expansion. The old house, whether that's a relationship, career, belief system, or identity, may have been perfect for a smaller version of your life. But as your purpose expands, as your capacity grows, as your impact increases, that structure becomes insufficient. The revelation that transforms your journey is recognizing that what's being demolished isn't your happiness or security. It's the limitation that would eventually constrain your greatest expression. The architect doesn't tear down a house out of malice toward the occupants, but out of vision for what their life could be in a more expansive space. The occupant, however, sees only dust and debris. They experience only the temporary discomfort of displacement without glimpsing the complete blueprint. This dynamic explains why the most significant spiritual awakenings often come wrapped in packages of apparent loss. The promotion you didn't get, the relationship that didn't work out, the plan that fell apart. These experiences feel like failure or rejection in the moment because you're standing in the dust of demolition without access to the architect's complete vision. From your limited vantage point, all you can see is what's being taken away, not what's being prepared. Behind the scenes of these painful transitions is a profound mercy at work. Imagine if you had received everything you begged for in past seasons, the relationship you pleaded to save, the opportunity you desperately wanted, the path you insisted was right. How many of those answered prayers would have actually limited the person you're becoming now? How often has retrospect revealed that what felt like divine rejection was actually divine protection? The journey through redirection requires a radical surrender of perspective. It means developing what spiritual masters have called reverse gratitude, the capacity to be thankful not just for what's given, but for what's withheld. It means training yourself to ask different questions when facing apparent loss. Instead of, "Why is this happening to me?" try, "What is this freeing me for?" Instead of, "What am I losing?" consider, "What am I being liberated from?" This shift doesn't eliminate grief or confusion, but it transforms how you move through these emotions. Rather than being trapped in resistance to what's leaving, you begin cultivating receptivity to what's arriving. You recognize that every divine subtraction is making space for a more aligned addition. What leaves by decree creates vacancy for something greater, not just different, but genuinely more resonant with your authentic design and destiny. If you've experienced a painful loss that eventually revealed itself as a necessary liberation in your life, share your insight by typing "liberation disguised as loss" in the comments. Let's explore how our past disappointments and failures often reveal themselves as strategic redirections when viewed through the lens of divine timing. If you've lived long enough, you've likely accumulated a collection of what-if moments. Those doors that closed, opportunities that vanished, relationships that ended, all leaving you wondering what might have been. We tend to idealize these lost possibilities, imagining only their potential benefits while overlooking the hidden complications they might have brought. But here's a perspective that changes everything. What if those closed doors weren't failures but protection? Take a moment to reflect honestly on your journey. How many times have you mourned a closed door only to discover years later that it actually shielded you from an invisible fire? The job you didn't get that would have relocated you to a company that later collapsed. The relationship that ended painfully but spared you years of deeper incompatibility. The investment opportunity you missed that later proved disastrous for those who jumped in. This revelation transforms how we interpret our personal history. Your past disappointments weren't random cruelties or evidence of your inadequacy. They were disguised messengers, strategic redirections guiding you toward alignments you couldn't possibly have anticipated at the time. What you labeled as rejection was often protection. What felt like abandonment was actually divine guidance working through circumstances. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring the fundamental difference between collapse as punishment and collapse as care. In the human paradigm, punishment is designed to correct through pain. It focuses on past transgressions and aims to modify behavior through negative consequences. But divine collapse operates on an entirely different principle. It uses apparent pain not as retribution, but as the birth canal for something superior. This distinction revolutionizes how we navigate difficult seasons. When you understand that what's happening isn't punishment, but repositioning, you stop asking, "What did I do wrong to deserve this?" and start wondering, what is being prepared through this process? The shift is profound, from shame to anticipation, from victim to participant, from passive recipient of consequences to active collaborator with divine wisdom. Think about how a skilled surgeon operates. From the patient's limited perspective, the procedure feels like an attack. Tissue is cut, systems are disrupted, pain follows. But the surgeon's perspective is completely different. Every incision is precise, every disruption intentional, all serving the ultimate purpose of healing and restoration. What appears as wound making is actually wound healing when viewed from the complete perspective. The journey of transformation requires understanding this paradox. The very experiences that feel most destructive are often the most constructive when their purpose is fully revealed. The business failure that forces you to reassess your authentic calling. The health crisis that realigns your priorities. The relationship breakdown that reveals patterns you couldn't see while inside it. These collapses aren't random disasters. They're strategic interventions designed to elevate you beyond limitations you've outgrown. Behind the scenes of your apparent defeats, a master strategist is at work, using even your most painful experiences as raw materials for your advancement. This isn't spiritual bypassing or toxic positivity that denies legitimate suffering. It's the profound recognition that suffering itself can be repurposed as the catalyst for unprecedented growth when interpreted through the lens of divine care rather than random cruelty. The mindset revolution happens when you begin approaching challenges with this question: if this isn't punishment but preparation, what might it be preparing me for? This reframing doesn't eliminate pain, but it transforms how you move through it. Pain with purpose becomes more navigable than pain perceived as pointless punishment. Difficulty understood as direction contains seeds of hope that difficulty interpreted as deserved suffering never could. The master key to unlocking this perspective is developing what spiritual traditions call long-view thinking. The ability to interpret today's experiences through the lens of their future implications rather than just their present discomfort. It's recognizing that the page you're currently on isn't the conclusion of your story, but merely a plot development leading to revelations you cannot yet imagine. If you've experienced a painful collapse that eventually revealed itself as divine care, redirecting you to something better, share your story by typing "redirected, not rejected" in the comments. Let's explore how applying this understanding to our present challenges transforms not just how we interpret our past, but how we navigate our future. The story of Abraham provides us with one of the most powerful archetypes for understanding divine transition in our lives. What makes Abraham's journey so instructive isn't just what happened, but how it happened. Notice this crucial distinction. Abraham wasn't violently torn from his homeland as a refugee or exile. He wasn't pushed out by persecution or conflict. Instead, he was called to leave by revelation, by an inner knowing that invited willing participation rather than forced compliance. This distinction transforms how we understand our own life transitions. There's a profound difference between being pushed from behind and being called from ahead. When you're pushed, you move from rejection. When you're called, you move toward reception. Abraham's departure wasn't escape, but ascension, not fleeing from something negative, but advancing towards something greater that couldn't manifest in his current environment. The revelation that changes everything is recognizing that Abraham's obedience wasn't blind submission to arbitrary authority. It was active collaboration with divine movement, a partnership between his willingness and divine guidance. He didn't understand the complete journey ahead, but he trusted that paths would open in the desert as he walked. This is the essence of faith as journey rather than destination. Not knowing all the steps, but taking the first one anyway. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring how divine transitions often manifest with a signature completely different from human transitions. Have you noticed that human doors typically close with drama, argument, and visible conflict? There's a confrontation, an ultimatum, a breaking point that everyone can identify. But divine walls often fall with an inexplicable certainty that defies conventional explanation. One day, you simply notice that something that once had tremendous power over you no longer does. The addiction that seemed unbreakable suddenly holds no appeal. The relationship that caused such turmoil no longer triggers emotional reactivity. The career path you once desperately pursued no longer resonates with your deepest values. There was no dramatic showdown, no defining moment of rupture, just a quiet recognition that something fundamental has shifted in your soul's landscape. These are the walls of Jericho falling without clamor, divine transitions that happen in the silent chambers of consciousness rather than the noisy arena of external events. What makes these transitions so powerful is precisely their quietness. They bypass the ego's resistance and operate at the level of identity transformation, changing not just what you do, but who you understand yourself to be. Behind the scenes of these silent shifts is a wisdom that knows confrontation often strengthens resistance rather than dissolving it. When we fight directly against a limitation, we paradoxically energize it through our attention and emotional investment. But divine methodology works differently. It doesn't attack the old directly, but rather grows the new so powerfully that the old simply becomes irrelevant, like a candle flame that isn't blown out, but simply forgotten in the presence of the rising sun. The journey towards spiritual maturity involves learning to recognize and trust these silent transitions. Instead of forcing dramatic confrontations or manufacturing emotional closure, you develop sensitivity to the subtle shifts in your internal atmosphere. You notice when something that once seemed essential has mysteriously lost its grip on your imagination. You recognize when a desire has silently transformed or a limitation has quietly dissolved. This awareness brings tremendous freedom. You no longer need to orchestrate elaborate exits from situations that no longer serve you. You don't need to justify or explain transitions that operate at the level of soul rather than strategy. The walls fall not because you've battered them down through willpower, but because they've become irrelevant to who you're becoming. The attachment dissolves not because you've analyzed it to death, but because your capacity has expanded beyond its confines. Abraham's journey teaches us that the most significant transitions often begin with the smallest steps of obedience. He didn't leap from Ur to the Promised Land in a single bound. He moved gradually, step by step, each act of trust creating the condition for the next revelation. Similarly, your own journey unfolds not in dramatic leaps, but in faithful steps, each one creating the platform for what could not have been revealed without that movement. If you've experienced one of these silent transformations, where something once essential mysteriously lost its power over you, share your experience by typing "silent liberation" in the comments. Let's explore how failure can be reframed not as final verdict, but as valuable information guiding us toward greater authenticity. One of the most profound mindset revolutions on the spiritual path is learning to transform failure from sentence to instruction. This mental alchemy changes everything about how you interpret life's disappointments. Most people operate from what we might call the lower mind, the perspective that sees failure as final judgment, as evidence of personal inadequacy, as confirmation that certain dreams weren't meant for you. But there's an elevated perspective available that completely reframes these experiences. From the elevated mind, failure isn't a verdict, but valuable data. It's not telling you to quit, it's showing you precisely what needs adjustment. Think about how the greatest innovators approach their work. Each failure is simply an experiment that provided essential information about what doesn't work, bringing them one step closer to what does. Thomas Edison famously said of his thousands of unsuccessful attempts at creating a working light bulb, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." The breakthrough comes when you recognize that each defeat contains specific information about what must be left behind, whether that's an approach, a belief, a timing issue, or a misalignment with your authentic design. The failure isn't saying you can't have this, but rather not this way. This subtle distinction transforms how you navigate challenges. Instead of collapsing into discouragement, you become a spiritual scientist, extracting the lesson from the experiment and applying it to your next iteration. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring why so many people abandon their journey just before breakthrough happens. There's a powerful principle at work in spiritual transformation that mirrors how healing happens in the physical body. Think about how an antibiotic works. You must take the full course of treatment even after symptoms disappear. Stopping prematurely allows the infection to resurge, often stronger and more resistant than before. Faith operates on this same principle. It's not a momentary choice, but a consistent application of belief that must be maintained until the new reality is fully established. This explains one of the most common patterns in the spiritual journey, why so many people abandon the process just before manifestation occurs. They begin with enthusiasm, maintain faith while they're feeling inspired, but interrupt the treatment once the initial symptoms improve or when the middle phase feels too uncomfortable. The journey through the narrow passage requires persistence precisely when it's most difficult to maintain. The middle phase of transformation, when you've left the familiar shore but haven't yet reached the new land, is where most people lose heart and turn back. It's as if they're standing at the threshold of breakthrough but turn away, unaware that just one more step would bring them into the expanded reality they've been seeking. Behind the scenes of every significant transformation is this principle of completion. The butterfly emerges only if the caterpillar completes its full metamorphosis in the chrysalis. The birth happens only after the full term of pregnancy. The harvest manifests only after the seed endures the complete dark season underground. Nature doesn't take shortcuts, and neither does spiritual growth. The revelation that changes everything is recognizing that doubt in the middle of the process is not a sign to abandon ship, but actually a normal part of the journey. Every hero's story includes what mythologist Joseph Campbell called the dark night of the soul. That moment when all seems lost, when the old identity is dying, but the new one hasn't fully emerged. This isn't the moment to quit. It's the precise point where perseverance matters most. This understanding brings tremendous compassion for yourself during difficult passages. Rather than interpreting doubt or difficulty as evidence that you're on the wrong path, you recognize these as natural aspects of transformation itself. The antibiotic creates die-off symptoms as it works. Faith creates dissolution of old patterns before new ones fully form. The discomfort isn't failure, it's evidence the medicine is working. When you approach your journey with this perspective, you develop what spiritual masters call patient impatience, the paradoxical ability to persist with urgency while accepting that some processes simply cannot be rushed. You understand that faith isn't rewarded for its intensity, but for its consistency, not for dramatic moments of belief, but for steady application through both inspiration and desolation. If you've experienced abandoning a process just before breakthrough or have learned to persist through the difficult middle phase of transformation, share your insight by typing "persistence through the passage" in the comments. Let's explore how imagination functions as the hidden laboratory where our future reality is first conceived before manifesting in the visible world. When most people hear the word obedience, they immediately picture something restrictive, a hierarchy where someone above gives orders and those below must comply without question. This misunderstanding has caused countless spiritual seekers to miss one of the most liberating principles of the divine journey. True obedience isn't submissive head-bowing or mindless rule-following. It's creative alignment with purpose, a dynamic partnership that activates your highest potential rather than diminishing it. Think about this profound mindset shift. What if obedience isn't about surrendering your power, but about aligning your power with a greater intelligence? What if it's not about blindly following someone else's map, but about courageously drawing your own map with each step you take? This is creative obedience, the radical willingness to advance even when the path ahead isn't fully visible, trusting that each movement forward generates the next section of the journey. The revelation that transforms your spiritual journey is recognizing that faith isn't a passive waiting game, but an active construction process. So many remain stagnant, praying for complete clarity before taking a single step, asking for the entire bridge to materialize before crossing the first plank. But this fundamentally misunderstands how divine partnership works. The blueprint unfolds as you walk, not before you begin. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring why movement activates faith in ways that contemplation alone never can. There's a profound principle at work in the spiritual realm that responds to motion, not to inertia. Consider how many people spend years studying faith, analyzing faith, discussing faith, without ever actually exercising faith. They become experts in the theory while remaining novices in the practice. The breakthrough comes when you recognize that faith grows stronger by building while walking, not by contemplating from afar. It's like the difference between studying swimming techniques from the poolside versus actually getting into the water. No amount of theoretical knowledge can substitute for the embodied wisdom that comes from immersion and movement. Your faith muscles develop through use, not through intellectual consideration. This understanding revolutionizes how you approach uncertainty. Rather than seeing unclear paths as reasons to wait, you recognize them as invitations to co-create. The divine wisdom doesn't give you the complete map because you're not meant to be merely a follower of predetermined routes, but an active participant in charting new territories. The path emerges beneath your feet precisely because your steps are necessary to its formation. Behind the scenes of this dynamic is a profound psychological truth. Security paralyzes while certainty mobilizes. Notice the crucial distinction here. Security seeks external guarantees, visible safety nets, and absolute assurances that nothing can go wrong. Certainty, by contrast, is an internal state, a deep knowing that transcends external evidence, a conviction that you'll navigate whatever arises even without knowing exactly how. The journey of transformation requires letting go of the illusion of security while embracing the power of certainty. Security asks, "What if I fall?" Certainty responds, "What if you fly?" Security demands to see every step of the staircase before taking the first one. Certainty knows that even if you can't see the whole staircase, you can trust the step that's directly in front of you. Consider the most significant breakthroughs in your own life journey. Didn't they require moving forward before you had complete clarity? That career change, that relationship, that creative project, that spiritual growth spurt, each required a moment where you chose creative obedience to your inner knowing rather than waiting for absolute security. You took a step, and somehow the bridge appeared beneath your feet, one plank at a time. This principle explains why some people make remarkable progress on their spiritual journey, while others remain stuck despite similar knowledge or resources. The difference isn't in how much they know, but in their willingness to move with what they know. One person waits by the shore for the waters to part completely before taking a step. Another puts their foot in the water, and only then does the miracle of separation begin. The impact of this understanding is revolutionary because it shifts the responsibility from passive waiting to active participation. You're no longer at the mercy of external signs or perfect conditions. Your movement itself becomes the catalyst for manifestation. This doesn't mean reckless action without discernment, but rather aligned action that flows from your deepest knowing, even when the complete picture isn't visible. If you've experienced this principle of faith-building bridges as you walk, where the path appeared only after you took that first uncertain step, share your experience by typing "bridges beneath my feet" in the comments. Let's explore how the imagination serves as a spiritual laboratory where we rehearse possibilities before they manifest in the physical world. One of the most transformative principles in spiritual growth is understanding how the divine operates in response to our movement. Have you noticed how many people remain perpetually stuck at the edge of their breakthrough, waiting for all the signals to align perfectly before taking a single step? They want the complete blueprint, the full guarantee, the entire bridge, visible from shore to shore before they'll risk even the first step. But here's the revelation that changes everything. God rarely explains the complete bridge. The divine responds to motion, not to stagnation. This principle operates throughout creation. The Red Sea didn't part for the Israelites until they approached the water. The manna didn't appear until after they left Egypt. The Jordan River didn't stop flowing until the priest's feet touched the water. This pattern reveals a profound truth about divine partnership. Movement activates provision in ways that contemplation alone never can. Think about your own experience. How many times have you waited for complete clarity before moving forward, only to discover that clarity actually came through the process of movement itself? The resources you needed, the connections that proved vital, the insights that were essential, none of these materialized while you were standing still, analyzing and planning. They emerged once you committed to the journey, once you took that first uncertain step into the unknown. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring a critical distinction that transforms how we understand spiritual obedience. There are fundamentally two types of obedience operating in the world, and confusing them has caused tremendous suffering. Religious obedience binds you to external rules, obligations, and expectations. It's rooted in fear, fear of punishment, fear of rejection, fear of failure. This form of obedience creates spiritual contraction rather than expansion. It makes your world smaller, not larger. Spiritual obedience, by contrast, is something radically different. It's not about submitting to external authority, but honoring the contract between your deepest self and the indwelling intelligence that guides you. It's an alignment with your authentic design rather than conformity to external demands. This form of obedience doesn't diminish your power, it amplifies it. By bringing you into resonance with a greater wisdom, the revelation that transforms your journey is recognizing that true spiritual obedience feels like liberation, not restriction. When you're aligned with your authentic purpose, even challenging steps feel congruent rather than confining. There's a profound difference between forcing yourself to follow rules that feel disconnected from your essence versus flowing with guidance that resonates with your deepest knowing. Behind the scenes of this distinction is the difference between fear-based motivation and love-based movement. Religious obedience asks, "What will happen to me if I don't comply?" Spiritual obedience asks, "What wants to express through me when I align with truth?" One constricts, the other expands. One focuses on avoiding punishment, the other on embodying potential. This understanding revolutionizes how you approach spiritual guidance. Instead of seeking direction from outside yourself, you learn to attune to the wisdom already operating within you. Instead of asking, "What am I supposed to do?" you begin asking, "What am I designed to express?" The shift is subtle but profound, from external conformity to internal congruence. Consider how this principle has manifested in your own experience. Think about times when you followed guidance that came from deep internal knowing rather than external pressure. Wasn't there a qualitative difference in how that movement felt in your body, in your energy, in your spirit? Didn't it create expansion rather than contraction, even when it challenged you to grow beyond familiar boundaries? The journey of transformation requires learning to distinguish between these two forms of obedience. The one that binds you in fear versus the one that liberates you into fuller expression. The one that makes you smaller versus the one that invites your expansion. The one that demands blind compliance versus the one that engages your creative participation. This discernment becomes especially crucial during times of uncertainty and transition, when the path ahead isn't clearly marked, when you're standing at the edge of the unknown, when you're being called to step beyond familiar territory. These are precisely the moments when knowing which voice to follow makes all the difference. The voice of fear disguises itself as prudence, as reasonable caution, as responsible planning. The voice of wisdom often appears riskier, less conventional, more challenging to explain to others. If you've experienced the difference between these two types of obedience, the restricting religious kind versus the liberating spiritual kind, share your insight by typing "liberated, not limited" in the comments. Let's explore how your imagination serves as the secret laboratory where new realities are conceived before they manifest in the visible world. There exists within you a hidden laboratory more powerful than any technology humans have ever created: your imagination. Yet most people have drastically misunderstood what this faculty is truly designed to do. We've relegated imagination to the realm of childhood fancy, artistic expression, or occasional daydreaming. But this profound misunderstanding has prevented us from accessing one of the most transformative spiritual tools at our disposal. Your imagination isn't just a place to visit when you're bored. It's the sacred workshop where future realities are conceived before they're birthed into physical manifestation. Think about this revelation. Every invention, every institution, every advancement in human history first existed as an image in someone's mind before it materialized in the physical world. The smartphone in your hand, the building you're sitting in, the music playing in the background, all began as imagination before becoming reality. Those who learn to direct this imaginative power consciously become architects of their destiny rather than passive recipients of recycled patterns from the past. This understanding changes everything about how you approach manifestation. Most people are trying to create new realities while their imagination remains fixated on old limitations. It's like trying to build a cathedral while only visualizing a shack. The imagination is where you rehearse expanded possibilities, seeing, feeling, and experiencing them internally before they can materialize externally. Your subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between vividly imagined experiences and physical ones. Both create neural pathways and emotional imprints that shape your perception and behavior. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring a crucial distinction that transforms how you use this spiritual technology. Many people confuse imagination with fantasy, but these are fundamentally different energies serving different purposes. Fantasy is escape, a flight from reality, a temporary distraction, a game without commitment to manifestation. It provides momentary emotional relief, but dissipates like smoke when confronted with actual challenges. Prophetic imagination, by contrast, is preparation, the ability to see what doesn't yet exist in the physical realm, and to hold that vision with such clarity and conviction that you're essentially giving the universe permission to manifest it through you. It's not disconnected from reality, but is actually engaging with a deeper level of reality, the causal realm where possibilities exist before they crystallize into form. The revelation that transforms your manifestation practice is recognizing that imagination isn't wishful thinking, it's spiritual technology. When Abraham was elderly and childless, standing under the night sky, God didn't just tell him about descendants. God invited him to look at the stars and count them, to engage his imagination in seeing what wasn't yet manifest. This wasn't idle fantasy, but prophetic preparation, training his mind to accept a reality his physical senses he couldn't yet detect. Behind the scenes of every miracle is this same process, the cultivation of internal images that contradict current circumstances but align with divine potential. The paralyzed man sees himself walking before physical healing manifests. The infertile woman feels herself holding a child before conception occurs. The entrepreneur visualizes successful impact before the business even launches. This isn't denial of current reality, but engagement with emerging reality. The journey from limitation to liberation requires this imaginative courage, the willingness to see beyond what your physical senses report, and to align your internal images with divine possibility rather than past patterns. Most people unwittingly use their imagination against themselves, repeatedly visualizing worst-case scenarios, anticipated failures, or past disappointments. They don't realize they're actually rehearsing the very limitations they're trying to overcome. The mindset revolution happens when you begin consciously directing this powerful faculty, treating your imagination not as a random thought generator, but as a sacred workshop where you deliberately craft the templates for your future experience. This isn't magical thinking that ignores practical action. Rather, imagination provides the blueprint that intelligent action follows. The architect must first see the building in their mind before drawing plans, securing materials, and beginning construction. Consider the difference. This creates in your approach to challenges. The untrained imagination fixates on obstacles, repeatedly playing mental movies of everything that could go wrong. The prophetically trained imagination acknowledges obstacles but focuses primarily on solutions, possibilities, and pathways forward. One creates contraction and paralysis, the other generates expansion and momentum. If you've experienced the difference between escapist fantasy and prophetic imagination, between mental distraction and genuine spiritual preparation, share your insight by typing prophetic not fantasy in the comments. Let's explore how your mental rehearsal through visualization creates the neurological and spiritual foundation for manifestation in the physical world. Have you ever watched Olympic athletes in those moments just before competition? They're often seen with eyes closed, bodies subtly moving, lips silently murmuring. They're not just focusing, they're literally rehearsing victory in their minds. This isn't some sports psychology gimmick, it's a profound application of spiritual technology. When these athletes visualize their performance with precise detail, feeling every movement, hearing every sound, experiencing the emotions of success, their nervous systems are actually learning victory before the starting signal ever sounds. This principle of mental rehearsal transforms how we approach manifestation in our spiritual journey. Your body doesn't distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and an actual physical one. Your neurons fire, your hormones release, your breathing patterns shift in response to mental images just as they do to external events. When you engage in visualization practiced with faith, not as casual daydreaming but as intentional spiritual exercise, your subconscious mind allies with divine grace to prepare the internal conditions necessary for external manifestation. The breakthrough comes when you understand that visualization isn't just about seeing images, but about creating a complete internal experience. It's feeling the emotions of the desired outcome, experiencing the sensations in your body, hearing the sounds, engaging all your senses in this internal rehearsal. When done with this level of immersion and conviction, you're essentially programming your entire system, mind, body, emotions, to recognize and move toward the reality you're rehearsing. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring what might be the most powerful force shaping your destiny, yet one that operates almost entirely beneath your conscious awareness. The greatest tyrant in human life isn't external oppression, economic systems, or social limitations. It's the internal voice, that ceaseless discourse running from dawn until deep sleep that narrates your experience, interprets your circumstances, and ultimately shapes your identity and reality. This invisible dialogue is the operating system of your soul. It determines more about your destiny than any external factor because it filters how you perceive everything, influences every decision you make, and generates the emotional climate you live in. Most people remain unaware of how this internal monologue tyrannizes their experience, criticizing, doubting, catastrophizing, limiting, all beneath the threshold of conscious attention. The revelation that transforms your journey is recognizing that this dialogue isn't just passive commentary, it's creative instruction. Every thought, every phrase, repeated in the silence of your mind, is a seed planted in the field of your subconscious. Initially, these thought seeds seem insignificant, but with repetition, they germinate and grow, either into weeds that choke your potential or into flowers that nourish your expansion. Behind the scenes of your consciousness, this internal dialogue is constantly programming your expectations, setting the parameters of what you believe is possible, and determining how you'll interpret future experiences. If your inner voice constantly reinforces limitation, "I always mess this up. Nothing ever works out for me. I'm not talented enough." These aren't just descriptions of reality. They're prescriptions creating your reality. The journey of transformation requires becoming aware of this hidden tyrant and deliberately reclaiming authority over your internal conversation. This isn't about positive thinking as superficial technique. It's about recognizing the profound spiritual truth that your inner dialogue is either aligning you with divine possibility or imprisoning you in past patterns. Each thought is either a brick in the wall of your limitation or a building block in the temple of your potential. Consider how dramatically different your life would be if the voice in your head consistently spoke with encouragement rather than criticism, with possibility rather than limitation, with faith rather than fear. The impact would extend far beyond feeling better. It would fundamentally alter what you attempt, how you interpret challenges, what opportunities you notice, and how you show up in every relationship and circumstance. This understanding revolutionizes spiritual practice. Instead of focusing exclusively on external behaviors or circumstances, you begin recognizing that the transformation of your internal dialogue is the most fundamental spiritual discipline. The battleground for your destiny isn't out there in the world of circumstances. It's within the landscape of your thoughts, in the silent conversations you have with yourself moment by moment, day after day. If you've become aware of the tyranny of your internal dialogue and have begun the sacred work of transforming these inner conversations, share your journey by typing "Reclaiming My Inner Voice" in the comments. Let's explore how the garden of your mind produces precisely what you plant in it, either weeds of limitation or flowers of possibility. Imagine your mind as a garden, not just metaphorically, but literally, a living ecosystem where every thought you repeat silently becomes a seed planted in the fertile soil of your subconscious. This isn't poetic imagery, it's spiritual mechanics at work. Those seemingly insignificant thoughts, when watered with repetition and emotional energy, inevitably germinate and grow into the landscape of your life experience. Your repeated thoughts today become your reality tomorrow, not by magic, but by the consistent operation of spiritual law. This revelation transforms how you approach your inner world. Think about how many people diligently tend the garden of their physical homes, watering plants, pulling weeds, creating beauty, while completely neglecting the garden of their minds. They carefully choose what foods to eat, but randomly consume any thought that happens to cross their mental landscape. They meticulously select what enters their homes, but leave the doors of their consciousness wide open to any passing idea, fear, or limitation. The breakthrough comes when you recognize yourself as the master gardener of your mind, with full authority over what gets planted and cultivated there. Yet how many of us water the weeds of worry, fertilize the seeds of fear, and then wonder why roses of peace and prosperity don't bloom in our experience? We nurture thoughts of lack, limitation, and inadequacy through constant repetition, then feel confused when these exact patterns manifest in our external circumstances. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring one of the most counterintuitive principles in the spiritual journey: how major interruptions in our lives often serve as divine invitations in disguise. When plans collapse, relationships end unexpectedly, careers transform, or health challenges emerge, our natural human response is to interpret these events as accidents at best or punishments at worst. We ask, why is this happening to me? Assuming the universe has made a mistake or is teaching us a harsh lesson. But what if we've fundamentally misunderstood what's happening? What if these major interruptions aren't random accidents or cosmic penalties, but intentional readjustments from above? Strategic repositionings designed to place us precisely where our deepest purpose can unfold. This perspective doesn't minimize the pain or challenge of these experiences, but it completely transforms how we navigate them and what we extract from them. Behind the scenes of what appears as disruption is often divine direction at work. Like a GPS that recalculates when you've veered off course, these interruptions frequently represent course corrections, leading you back toward your authentic path, rather than random detours taking you away from it. The job loss forces you to reconsider what truly fulfills you. The relationship ending creates space for connections more aligned with your evolution. The health challenge invites a fundamental reassessment of priorities and patterns. The wisdom tradition teaches that these veiled invitations often arrive precisely when you've outgrown your current container, but haven't yet recognized the need for expansion. When you're clinging to comfort zones that can no longer support your soul's growth. When you're persisting in patterns that limit rather than liberate your potential. When you're settling for less than your divine design demands. Interruption arrives as mercy, not punishment. Consider how many of history's greatest contributions emerged from what initially appeared as devastating interruptions. Nelson Mandela's imprisonment seemed like the end of his freedom work, yet became the crucible that transformed him into a global symbol of reconciliation. C.S. Lewis's grief over losing his wife, which he initially experienced as cruel punishment, birthed A Grief Observed, a work that has comforted millions. Time and again, what appears as derailment reveals itself as divine redirection when viewed with sufficient perspective. The mindset. Revolution happens when you begin approaching life's interruptions with curious anticipation rather than automatic resistance. Instead of immediately asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin wondering, "Where might this be leading me?" Instead of seeing yourself as a victim of circumstance, you recognize yourself as the recipient of an invitation, one that might be uncomfortable or challenging, but ultimately serves your highest unfolding. This doesn't mean bypassing genuine grief or pretending difficulties aren't real. It means holding both the legitimate pain of transition and the possibility that this transition is ultimately serving a greater purpose than you can currently perceive. It's developing what spiritual pioneers call sacred curiosity, the ability to remain open to hidden purpose even while navigating very real challenges. If you've experienced a major life interruption that eventually revealed itself as a divine invitation to something greater, Share your revelation by typing "interrupted into purpose" in the comments. Let's explore how what appears as the tyranny of your internal dialogue can be transformed into the most powerful ally in creating your desired reality. One of the most subtle yet powerful obstacles in the spiritual journey is what we might call the confirmation trap, that invisible prison camouflaged as spiritual prudence or wise discernment. Have you noticed how easy it is to fall into the pattern of seeking sign after sign, confirmation after confirmation, always waiting for absolute certainty before taking a single step of faith? This pattern disguises itself as spiritual sensitivity, but in reality, it's often fear wearing the mask of caution. The trap works like this. You feel an inner prompting, a direction, an invitation to growth, but instead of responding to that initial clarity, you begin negotiating with the divine. If this is really you speaking, show me one more sign, then another, each. Confirmation briefly satisfies, but quickly dissolves into renewed doubt, creating an endless cycle that keeps you perpetually planning, but never participating in your own transformation. It's like standing at the edge of a pool, constantly checking the temperature, analyzing the water quality, watching others swim, but never actually getting wet. This pattern isn't random. It's a sophisticated form of resistance that the ego creates to maintain the status quo. The soul that habitually refuses action until receiving all external confirmations is actually training its mind for inertia. It's developing a spiritual muscle memory of hesitation rather than initiation. Life becomes an endless waiting room where you're perpetually preparing for a journey you never begin. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring a profound truth about the spiritual path that few fully grasp. The map of your unique journey doesn't exist until your feet walk it. This isn't a poetic metaphor. It's a literal description of how authentic spiritual growth unfolds. No true destination worth reaching has pre-established, well-worn paths leading directly to it. The most significant transformations in your life require venturing into uncharted territory. Think about the most meaningful breakthroughs in human history. The Wright brothers had no blueprint for flight. Einstein had no roadmap to relativity. Martin Luther King Jr. had no step-by-step guide to civil rights. Transformation. What they all shared wasn't certainty about the path, but clarity about the destination and willingness to begin walking toward it without having all the steps illuminated in advance. The revelation that transforms your journey is recognizing that the divine doesn't work like a GPS, providing turn-by-turn directions before you start the car. It operates more like an inner compass that reveals the next step only after you've taken the current one. Those waiting to see the complete path before departing never leave the familiar shore of what's already known. They remain spiritual theorists rather than spiritual practitioners. Behind the scenes of this dynamic is a profound spiritual principle: co-creation. The universe isn't delivering predetermined destinies. It's inviting collaborative creation. Your willingness to move with incomplete information isn't recklessness. It's participation in the divine dance of manifestation. Each step you take creates ripples of possibility that couldn't exist without your movement. The path emerges through this dynamic partnership between your choices and divine response. Consider how different your life would be if you applied this understanding to your current challenges and opportunities. Instead of waiting for perfect clarity, complete confirmation, or risk-free guarantees, what if you honored the clarity you already have by taking a single step in that direction? Not leaping blindly, but moving intentionally with the light. Currently available, trusting that the next section of path will be revealed once you've honored the illumination already given. This mindset revolution transforms hesitation into holy momentum. It doesn't eliminate discernment, it simply prevents discernment from becoming disguised paralysis. The wisdom tradition teaches that divine guidance typically provides just enough light for the step we're on, not the entire journey. This isn't divine stinginess, but divine wisdom. If we could see all 1,000 steps at once, we'd likely become overwhelmed or try to skip important stages of development that only become clear through the actual journey. The journey of transformation requires developing what spiritual pioneers call faithful flexibility, the ability to move decisively with current clarity while remaining open to course corrections and unexpected turns. It's navigating by compass rather than map, following direction rather than demanding detailed itinerary. This approach keeps you simultaneously grounded and responsive, committed yet adaptable. If you've experienced breaking free from the confirmation trap and discovering that your path revealed itself only as you began walking it, share your breakthrough by typing "Walking reveals the way" in the comments. Let's explore how your environment, the people, places and atmospheres you immerse yourself in, creates an invisible ecology that either nurtures or hinders your spiritual growth. One of the most overlooked factors in your spiritual journey is what we might call the invisible ecology that surrounds you daily. We often think of ourselves as independent beings, making autonomous choices based purely on our internal values and desires. But this perspective misses a profound truth. We are constantly shaped by an intricate network of forces that influence our thoughts, emotions, decisions, and ultimately our destiny. This isn't some mystical concept. It's a practical reality that spiritual masters have understood for millennia. Think about how a plant's growth is determined not just by its genetic potential, but by the soil it's planted in, the amount of sunlight it receives, the quality of water available, even the other plants surrounding it. In the same way, your own development is profoundly influenced by the environments you inhabit. But here's the revelation that changes everything. Environment isn't just physical place. It's active force, energetic vibration, cultivation medium for your ideas, relationships, and spiritual potential. The breakthrough comes when you recognize that no matter how powerful your intentions or how sincere your prayers, if you're planted in toxic soil, your growth will always be stunted. You can have the most magnificent oak tree seed, but if you plant it in shallow, rocky ground, it will never reach its full height. Similarly, you can have extraordinary potential, but if you're immersed in environments that don't support your expansion, your destiny will remain largely unexpressed. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring a counterintuitive truth about environments. They don't just affect you, they actively program you. The conversations you regularly participate in, the dominant moods of your primary relationships, the unspoken assumptions of your social circles, all of these aren't just influencing your conscious thoughts, but are actually writing code in your subconscious mind. They're creating default settings that operate beneath your awareness, shaping your perceptions and responses automatically. This understanding transforms how you approach your spiritual journey. Instead of focusing exclusively on personal discipline or individual practice, you begin recognizing that the company you keep, the media you consume, the spaces you inhabit, and the conversations you engage in are either amplifying your growth or undermining it. You realize that environment isn't something you passively experience, but something you must actively curate if you want your highest potential to flourish. Behind the scenes of your development is this profound ecological principle. Everything is either growing or dying based on the nutrients available in its environment. Just as a fish absorbs the quality of the water it swims in, your consciousness absorbs the predominant vibrations of your surroundings. If you spend hours daily immersed in anxiety-producing news, conflict-centered relationships, or cynicism-based conversations, these frequencies inevitably infiltrate your thought patterns, regardless of your intentions. The wisdom tradition teaches that transformation happens most effectively through immersion, not just information. You can read 1,000 books on courage, but if you spend most of your time with fearful people, their vibration will impact you more than the knowledge you've accumulated. This isn't about judgment or superiority, but about recognizing the contagious nature of consciousness itself. Fear is contagious. Limitation is contagious. But so are courage, vision, and faith. This understanding leads us to one of the most misunderstood aspects of the spiritual journey, the sacred role of boundaries. Many have been conditioned to believe that true love always opens doors, always says yes, always accepts without measure or limit. But this perspective fundamentally misunderstands both love and spiritual growth. In reality, boundaries aren't walls of selfishness, but protection for your destiny's seed. Think of it this way: a garden without fences is vulnerable to animals that can trample emerging plants. A home without doors allows anyone to enter, regardless of their intentions. Similarly, a life without boundaries permits energies, relationships, and influences that may damage the delicate ecology of your spiritual development. Setting limits isn't unspiritual. It's profoundly spiritual. It's recognizing that your divine assignment is worth protecting from influences that would diminish or distort it. The revelation that transforms your journey is understanding that saying no can be as sacred as saying yes when that no protects the purpose you're designed to fulfill. Jesus himself set clear boundaries, withdrawing from crowds when necessary, limiting access to his inner circle, and clearly defining the terms of discipleship. These weren't acts of rejection, but of stewardship, carefully managing the precious resources of his time, energy, and purpose. If you've recognized how your environment is either nurturing or limiting your spiritual growth, share your insight by typing "curating my ecology" in the comments. Let's explore how the waiting periods in our lives, those times when nothing seems to be happening, are actually seasons of active preparation beneath the surface. Perhaps nothing tests our faith more profoundly than waiting periods. Those seasons when progress seems stalled, prayers appear unanswered, and promises feel distant rather than drawing closer. The human mind, conditioned for immediate results and visible progress, naturally interprets these waiting periods as divine neglect or personal failure. If God really heard me, surely I would have received an answer by now. If I were truly on the right path, wouldn't doors be opening more quickly? These thoughts arise so naturally that we rarely question their validity. But what if we've fundamentally misunderstood what's happening in these apparent delays? What if what feels like divine silence or promises receding is actually strategic incubation, a precisely designed season where work is happening beneath the surface that couldn't occur any other way? This perspective transforms waiting from passive endurance to active preparation, from frustrating delay to purposeful development. Think about how a master potter works with clay. There's the initial shaping, yes, but then comes a critical period where nothing visible seems to happen. The clay must sit, must dry to just the right consistency before the next stage can begin. Rush this process, and the vessel cracks in the kiln. The waiting isn't empty time, it's essential preparation. The potter isn't absent or negligent during this period, but is precisely timing the next intervention based on conditions that only the master can fully perceive. God's timing isn't slowness, but absolute precision. It accounts for factors we cannot see, variables we cannot calculate, and intersections we cannot anticipate. The divine timekeeper isn't running behind schedule, but is coordinating countless elements to create the perfect moment for manifestation. Not a moment too soon, which would find you unprepared, nor a moment too late, which would find you discouraged beyond recovery. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring the most sophisticated guidance system you've been given for navigating uncertainty, the internal arbiter of peace. In a world full of conflicting advice, contradictory signs, and compelling arguments for different directions, how do you discern the authentic path from attractive counterfeits? The revelation that transforms your decision-making is recognizing that inner peace functions as your spiritual GPS, with a precision no external confirmation can match. This peace isn't emotional excitement or temporary relief. It's a profound settledness that remains consistent even when logic argues against it, even when external voices question it, even when circumstances seem to contradict it. It's the silent referee that whispers in the soul's depths when something isn't beneficial, creating a subtle but unmistakable dissonance when you're moving toward what doesn't align with your authentic design and destiny. Consider how many significant decisions in your life journey came down to this inner knowing that transcended logical analysis. The relationship that looked perfect on paper but left you inexplicably unsettled. The opportunity that seemed less impressive but carried a deep sense of rightness. The direction that friends questioned but that your soul consistently confirmed through persistent peace. These weren't random feelings, but the sophisticated operation of your internal guidance system. Behind the scenes of this peace is what spiritual traditions call the witness, that part of your consciousness that observes without being caught in the drama of emotions or the tangle of thoughts. This witness knows things your analytical mind cannot access. It perceives alignments and misalignments that exist beyond conscious reasoning. When properly attuned to, it becomes the most reliable compass for navigating life's complex terrain. The journey of transformation requires learning to distinguish between peace and other states that might masquerade as spiritual guidance. Excitement can feel spiritual, but often fades when challenges arise. Emotional relief can provide temporary comfort, but doesn't necessarily indicate alignment with truth. Fear disguised as prudence can create artificial peace by avoiding necessary growth. The peace that serves as true arbiter transcends all these states. It persists through both comfort and challenge, both certainty and mystery. This understanding revolutionizes decision-making. Instead of the exhausting process of seeking endless external confirmations or getting caught in analytical paralysis, you begin cultivating sensitivity to this internal referee. You learn to ask, does this direction, this choice, this relationship, this commitment create expansion or contraction in my soul? Does it generate genuine peace or subtle dissonance? These questions bypass the mind's endless deliberations and access deeper wisdom. The most profound turning points in your journey will likely come not through dramatic revelations or burning bushes, but through this quiet, persistent peace that outlasts emotion and transcends circumstance. It's the still, small voice that doesn't need to shout, because its authority comes not from volume but from resonance with your deepest truth. If you've experienced this phenomenon of peace functioning as your internal referee, guiding you toward choices that later proved profoundly right, even when they didn't make logical sense at the time, share your experience by typing "peace as my compass" in the comments. Let's explore how spiritual transitions require specific rituals and practices that prepare us to cross significant thresholds. Throughout the spiritual journey, there comes a critical moment when intellectual understanding must transform into embodied practice, when the principles you've learned must move from concept into concrete action. This is where the transition ritual becomes not just helpful, but essential. These sacred movements aren't arbitrary religious exercises, but precise spiritual technologies designed to prepare your entire being, body, mind, and spirit for crossing significant thresholds. Ancient wisdom traditions understood something modern spirituality often overlooks. Major transitions require ceremonial support. Just as indigenous cultures marked life passages with specific rituals, your movement into new spiritual territory benefits from intentional practices that honor the significance of the crossing. These aren't empty formalities, but powerful tools that align your entire system with the reality you're stepping into. The transition ritual involves multiple dimensions of preparation, creating what spiritual pioneers call whole being readiness. Daily silence creates the internal space necessary for hearing subtle guidance. Purpose writing clarifies and crystallizes your authentic intention beyond fleeting emotion or borrowed ambition. Emotion examination helps you distinguish between fear disguised as intuition and genuine guidance masked as fear, a critical discernment at threshold moments. The surrender prayer isn't passive resignation, but active release of control, acknowledging that while you determine direction, the exact route may unfold in ways your limited perspective cannot anticipate. Path visualization is the sacred rehearsal where your nervous system and subconscious mind prepare for realities not yet visible to your physical eyes. Your body literally learns what hasn't happened yet, creating neural pathways for what's coming. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring one of the most profound aspects of this ritual, the three-line altar practice. This isn't elaborate religious ceremony, but powerful spiritual technology. On a single page, you write 3 simple lines that create a bridge between invisible intention and visible manifestation. The first line names your highest purpose, what genuinely honors both divine design and your authentic calling. The second line acknowledges the dominant emotion you're experiencing, creating honest relationship with your current state rather than spiritual bypassing. The third line describes the peace or disturbance you sense when holding the intention and emotion together. This practice functions as a spiritual diagnostic tool, revealing alignments and misalignments that might otherwise remain hidden beneath rationalization or spiritual platitudes. When purpose and peace align despite emotional fluctuation, you've discovered a reliable confirmation that transcends both logic and feeling. When purpose and emotion align but peace is absent, you've identified timing that needs adjustment or intention that requires refinement. Behind the scenes of this seemingly simple practice is profound spiritual wisdom. True guidance harmonizes all dimensions of your being rather than creating internal fragmentation. The divine doesn't lead through confusion, forcing one aspect of your nature to override another. Instead, authentic direction creates what mystical traditions call congruence, where your purpose, your emotional reality, and your deep peace can eventually align, even if that alignment requires patience and process. The final movements of the transition ritual involve peace declaration, speaking aloud the certainty that transcends circumstance, closing external conversations, temporarily creating sacred silence around your decision to prevent dilution through premature exposure, and taking a concrete faith step, a physical action, however small, that bridges invisible intention and visible manifestation. This understanding leads us to one of the most transformative principles in spiritual growth, faith in action. The universe operates on a profound call and response pattern that countless spiritual pioneers have verified through direct experience. You take a step, and the bridge appears beneath your feet. You make a decision from your deepest knowing, and the path straightens before you. You obey that quiet inner prompting, and provision finds its route to you through channels you couldn't have orchestrated. This isn't magical thinking, but spiritual mechanics, the consistent operation of universal law that responds to authentic movement. The bridge doesn't materialize for those standing still, endlessly analyzing or waiting for complete certainty. The path doesn't straighten for those unwilling to walk while it's still winding. The provision doesn't flow to those who refuse to begin until all resources are visible. The revelation that transforms your journey is recognizing that heaven partners with those who choose to. Trust through action, not just intention. The divine economy doesn't reward passive belief, but active faith. Not just mental agreement, but embodied participation in the unfolding of possibility. This partnership creates what spiritual masters call the miracle of emergence, where resources, clarity, and connections appear that simply weren't visible from your previous vantage point. If you've experienced this phenomenon of taking a step of faith and watching as invisible bridges appeared beneath your feet, share your breakthrough by typing "bridges beneath my feet" in the comments. Let's explore how the internal voice, that constant narrator of your experience, forms either the most limiting prison or the most liberating pathway in your spiritual journey. As we reach this moment together, I hope you felt that distinct sense of divine guidance touching your own journey. The principles we've explored aren't just abstract concepts, but living truths that can transform how you navigate each chapter of your unfolding story. The bridge appears when you step, the path straightens when you move, the provision finds its way when you trust. This is the beautiful dance between faith and manifestation that has been available to you all along. If something within these words has resonated with your spirit, if you've felt that unmistakable nudge of recognition as we've explored these principles, I'd love for you to be part of our growing community. Subscribe to join us on this journey of spiritual discovery, where we'll continue uncovering these hidden dimensions of divine guidance together. The conversations we have here aren't just about information, they're about transformation. That's why I'd be grateful if you'd leave a like on this video. It's a simple way of acknowledging the connection we've shared and helping others discover these same truths that have touched you today. For those who've journeyed with me all the way to this point, I'd love to know you're here. Simply type "divine guidance activated" in the comments to let me know these principles have found fertile soil in your consciousness. This exploration doesn't end here. There's a video right beside this one that delves into how these principles of divine guidance manifest in practical decision-making. Click there and join me as we continue unwrapping the mysteries of spiritual navigation together. Until we meet again in that space, remember that you're never truly walking alone. Divine guidance is already illuminating your path, even in the moments when you can't yet see it.